Welcome to the Public Works Nerds Podcast with Marc and Mike.
Hey, Marc.
Hey, Mike.
So we're here. I'm a little nervous. I think you're a little nervous. We're kicking off our new podcast, the Public Works Nerds.
Yeah, this is a great idea. I'm glad we're doing this, and we've been talking about this for a while, but we're really excited to get this going, and welcome to everybody who's listening right now. Welcome to our podcast experiment. We're going to geek out here, as the name would imply, our Public Works nerds. But we're going to geek out about public works, and we're going to share good ideas across the country and eventually, hopefully, across the globe. Wouldn't that be great?
that would be fun. And kind of just going back to origin story, Marc and I have known each other since the beginning of our careers, both went to the University of Minnesota. Turns out we shared the exact same birthday. I was the traffic engineer in Maple Grove early on in my career, and when I left to go start my company, my boss, Ken Ashfeld, looked at me and said, "Mike, that's okay, you can quit, but before you go, you have to find your replacement." And I was fortunate enough, I took it seriously and brought Marc in, and we've been tied together ever since, and that was 20-something years ago.
Yeah, and it's amazing how different our careers have diverged from that point. But also, we're still have a lot of the same interests, and we're coming back on a shared topic and love of public service here, I think, too, for this.
So yeah, we're both at interesting inflection points in our career, some time of change, and that's conversations how we're ended up doing this podcast. Marc, you were working for cities for about 20 years, almost the last 8 of them as the Public Works Director for the city of Roseville, Minnesota. Why don't you tell me about this latest transition into moving to work for Bolton & Menk and your new title and role there?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And, like you said, I've spent the last almost 10 years of my career at the city of Roseville started there as a city engineer, was promoted to the Public Works Director. And really enjoyed it. Just really enjoyed the role, having stewardship over the public infrastructure there, and making sure we were doing the right thing for the right reasons. And I had a really great team, some really good people there. But and I thought I was going to be a public works director for the rest of my career.
I thought you were too. Yeah,
I thought I would retire as a public works director, and maybe not necessarily for Roseville, but somewhere. But, it's interesting, and I think it's the old adage of at some point it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I honestly, several of my last positions, even though they were public sector jobs, I wasn't looking for them when I made the move. It was, there were opportunities I heard about from you. When you left Maple Grove, from people on the City Engineers Association Executive Committee when I was there, and I moved from Maple Grove to Roseville. And in this case, it's no different. Chris Cromie, my boss at Bolton & Menk, we were having coffee and we were just chatting. And and I think, just talking about some of the stuff that I'd been working on and how things were going, I think he kind of sensed maybe a little bit of burnout in me on the public sector side. And we just got to talking about some things and some opportunities, and he came up with a really interesting concept of this smart cities realm and developing a smart cities market for Bolton & Menk. And for those of you that may not know, Bolton & Menk is a civil engineering firm here in the Twin Cities, but we also have offices in Iowa. We have offices in North and South Carolina. We're developing some presence out in Colorado. But it started as two guys in a garage. That's kind of our tagline, but it started as 2 guys in a garage just outside of Mankato, Minnesota. And their bread and butter was serving small city communities that didn't have their own engineering staff, that didn't, that just needed help building a water treatment plant or a sewage treatment plant or redesigning and building roads and dealing with those civil engineering tasks. And they really found their niche doing that and serving the smaller communities in particular.
It started in the 50s?
Actually, the 40s. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. 40s and the 50s, and they started to grow slowly and surely, and opened a couple offices, and that has grown into this really great organization that it is now with almost 1,000 employees, and I should know the exact number of offices, but Chris and I sat down and we talked, and I have a passion through my 20 years of public service. I have a passion for cities and municipalities and engineering and at that level and helping people at that level. And this was a really great way to take my love and passion for technology and new applications and that, which I've spent the 20 years either at Maple Grove or Roseville doing new things and pushing the envelope on things. And, being able to do that on a much broader scale and helping a much more diverse set of communities and such. So really excited about that opportunity. And then, that got into talking about, well, how can we learn from what's going on out there right now, the good things, the innovative things that people are doing, and how do we share that? And that's how we got here.
Yeah, that's how my brain started spinning as you were telling me about your new role and how it wasn't the typical path coming out of the public side going to private is you become a client rep, you work with a handful of communities, you're working on projects, helping them grow. And I know you weren't going to leave public service to go do that, but I think Chris dangled a carrot in front of you, the new technology, the idea of how can we do more with less? How can we leverage technology? How can we disseminate this information? The way you described it to me was within Bolton and Mink, but also to the Midwestern community and then even maybe globally. But that's where my brain kicks in of, hey, you're learning all this stuff. Your job now is to be the guide out on the frontier looking for this new stuff, the latest and greatest, and making sure Bolton and Mink staff know about it and making sure the contacts of Bolton and Mink know about it. And my brain immediately went, why stop there?
Yeah. So, talk about you, Mike. How did you get from, you were a traffic engineer at a suburban community in Minnesota, and all of a sudden you kind of flipped a switch and you went private and you really grew a business from the ground up into something really successful. Talk about innovation, coming up with some really innovative ways to change the way cities and counties and the public sector collects data and uses that data. Really changed the mindset on a lot of things, especially like turning movement counts, Yeah. So talk about that. Talk about how that happened and how you got to that point.
So somewhere along the line, I kind of had this entrepreneurial itch I had to scratch, and I was at an Institute of Transportation Engineers annual meeting in Chicago and and this is while I was working for Maple Grove, but I heard about on the coasts there were firms that specialized in just doing traffic counting for all levels of government as well as other consultants. And there was nothing like that here in Minnesota. And at the time, I was on the board of the North Central section of ITE and worked my way up to president. And from there, I had a network of people. And I just started talking to folks like you of, hey, would you hire me to do this? And Bolton and Mink was one of my first clients of, when we're a little bit overwhelmed and we can't get out to put the tubes on the ground, on the road, or go out and do turning movement counts, we'll outsource that to you. So it was really a weekend kind of job. I hired a couple of college kids to do it. But then as things blossomed, friends started to say, well, we can't do this consulting work. Do you think you could do this? And I'm eternally grateful to Ken Ashfield at Maple Grove. I needed the job. I couldn't lose my income from being a city employee. So I talked to Ken right away. I'm like, I need permission. I'm not going to get fired over this. And he's like, Mike, you can do the traffic counting thing. That's great. And you can even do consulting work as long as it's not within Maple Grove. And hey, have at it. Whatever you can make work as long as you're getting your work done here. So Ken was fantastic that way. And so little opportunities start to bubble up and I'm looking for them, and just like there was enough work that I'm like, okay, this is getting really stressful keeping the side gig going with the full-time job. And I decided, hey, I can always go back. I have a great network. I can go get a job, but let's take a few months and try to make a run at this full-time. And that was in about 2002. Yep. And from there, it was blossomed out the data collection practice. We got to be national doing that around the country. Then developed a consulting practice with half a dozen traffic engineers, and we're doing work, a lot of private traffic impact studies, some signal design, that kind of stuff, and working for the VA around the country and Quick Trip and Walmart, that kind of stuff. But really a big change for me came when Myovision, a private company about a decade ago, started using video cameras for collecting traffic data. I was one of their first clients, but I had some issues with just how the technology worked, and kind of like two guys in a garage, I literally went to my garage and got stuff at the thrift store and online and started putting together my own camera system that worked about half the time, but just kept tinkering and came up with a product line called the Count Cam and Count Cloud that leveraged machine vision, artificial intelligence to collect traffic data. And I've been pushing for more than a decade we used to do 2-hour little tiny snapshots of turning movement counts, but as we can use technology, why aren't we getting full days worth of traffic counts to make sure we're making the right decision, that we're not catching an edge case? Let's make sure there wasn't a parade on day one when we collected day two. Let's have a second day to make sure each day looks kind of similar. Seems pretty common sense, but the industry started with what was practical, and that was a clipboard and a pencil. But as the technology improved, we kept growing with it. Along the line, I've always been interested in learning and sharing information. I started a blog about 15 years ago called Mike on Traffic, and that was about traffic engineering. And it attracted other traffic engineers around the world and just sharing best practices and stories and ideas, and started developing webinars off of that and some training materials. Then the pandemic hit. Like everyone, changed all of our lives, led a little bit to your burnout at the city. I had to shrink my company to survive. In the heart of it, nobody's counting cars because the pandemic solved congestion. So everything we were working on dried up. So we really shrunk, focused on our products, and now a couple years later, I've had the great fortune of selling my business just a couple weeks ago. And so trying to take a little bit of time off. I've been working continually since I was 14, but doing this podcast seems like a great way to stay energized and even go one level up. I've been at the traffic engineering, traffic data collection level my whole career, but I'm even more interested in the whole city, the whole public works and technology, and learning more and disseminating best practices. So that's my 5-minute career so far. Yeah.
So let me ask you this, since you were going to ask me this according to the script. Let me ask you this, as an outsider, what does smart cities mean to you? Like, what does that term mean, and how does that apply to our industry?
Smart cities, I have two reactions to it. The first reaction early on was I'm a little jaded that this is a Verizon, AT&T, Siemens, IBM coming to me as a city traffic engineer saying, hey, put in this $500,000 computer system to run all of your traffic signals and layer on technology and give us lots of money so we can make you smart. And I'm like, I have an engineering degree and I'm licensed. I made it through the PE. I'm not that dumb. And that's kind of what it implied to me was, hey, we'll help you be smart. It was like, well, I was smart before you showed up. So the idea of smart cities and applying technologies and kind of doing more with less and doing better, I buy into that. But I prefer the term wise cities, which I haven't heard used very much. But, sometimes a couple of stop signs is the right answer for $500 versus putting in a $300,000 system. Right. So that's hopefully what we're going to tease out over the podcast is what are the right cases? What's the new and greatest stuff? But how do you go through making these decisions on when to apply a clipboard and a pencil versus a video camera? Kind of, there's a whole spectrum.
Yeah, and I agree. And I've had a little bit more time and intention in thinking about this smart cities. market and term, and what does that really mean? And like you with kind of coming up with the wise cities thing, for me, I think, every city or most cities, I guess, are smart cities. They do things that they need to do in the way they need to do it. And so I really frame it as how do we help, and for Bolton & Mink, how do we help make our clients smarter? How do we help their operations become smarter? And that's really looking for, maybe little used technology or new aspects of technology. The Internet of Things. I think that's going to become a big deal particularly as 5G and more broadband and more cell networks get better and expand, and the network becomes more dense. How do we use Internet of Things at the government level, at the city level, municipal level, to help with our detect water leaks and detect issues with our sanitary flow or stormwater flow and help manage those things? And so that's the whole smart city thing. Who came up with this? Like you said, it was a Siemens thing, or the cellular industry, or somebody came up with this smart city thing. Kind of like 30, 40 years ago, somebody came up with ITS, intelligent transportation systems, and so how do we really apply that in the real world?
But I think our timing is great as we're recording this. All of a sudden, ChatGPT and all the artificial intelligence, and SpaceX just successfully launched a huge rocket. I mean, it was a technical success.
Right. It was. But I had some conversations with people that see it blow up. Like, no, it was really a success.
Yeah, right.
For them. Yeah, but anyway.
But then we're going to get to Starlink, where they're going to have all this satellites, and we're going to have this coverage. So just the pace of the technology keeps moving faster and faster and faster. And I know none of us can keep up with the pace of technology without guides out there helping us. And so I'm really excited to be able to play that role with you.
Yeah. And, I think as we get into this podcast and we develop and this evolves, as our topics evolve and this, that, and the other, and people find us with some interesting things too, I think that will be the really fun part. It's really about, from a city perspective, as we help these people that are listening, the practitioners out there, it's how do we help you get ready for this stuff? How do we help you see this stuff on the horizon and get ready for it? You're not necessarily going to use it tomorrow or the day after or whatever, but that you're ready for it, that you're developing your fiber network, or you're helping develop that cellular network or whatever, so you're ready to use that technology sometime in the future. But and to that point, we're starting to line up some topics and some guests in that, and so looking forward, what as a listener that you found this, what can you look forward to hearing here over the next several weeks?
Yeah, some of the housekeeping details I think we should get into is Marc and I are doing this because we want to have fun. Bolton & Mink is a sponsor of the podcast, and Marc's a Bolton & Mink employee. I am not a Bolton & Mink employee. We have a great team helping us produce the podcast that are Bolton & Mink staff, but we hope that this becomes universal, that we're not just going to be in a Bolton & Mink universe. We're going to, if there are other consulting firms, vendors, cities who aren't Bolton & Mink clients, counties, we want to be universal. Yep. So we're not exactly locked in Bolton & Mink's trunk on that. Yep. And we're committed to running 20 episodes for the podcast. We're going to learn and evolve and get better at this over time. So we're going to have 2 seasons with 10 episodes each, and then we're going to pause and reflect on are we doing what we set out to do?
Right.
But we do have that commitment. We're not going to be one of those podcasts you see in the player that has 3 episodes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Like you said, we are committed to getting seeing this through. At least 20 episodes. That because we know that there's going to be some growth in there. We know the 20th episode is going to be better than the 3rd episode. At least we hope, and we hope you think so too. But and we'll see where we go from there. But like Mike said, we're not just going to drop 3 episodes and then be done with this. So just as a kind of looking forward, this is some of the stuff that we've lined up. Some of the topics that we've lined up for our first several episodes, and one of the things is asset management. We'll be talking to the city of Eagan about their journey through asset management.
Yeah, and that's a huge topic that I assume we're going to end up having multiple episodes, but this is kind of the 30,000 foot view of thinking about asset management.
Right. And then, one thing that's big in the colder climates, maybe not so much for you guys down in Florida, but up here in the northern climates, there's a lot of scrutiny and skepticism in that on the use of salt for winter operations. And so we're going to be talking to one of the Bolton & Menck employees here. It's a growing service that we're offering, and that is designing for lower salt usage. So how can we actually design our roadways and our infrastructure so we don't need to use as much salt to begin with?
We're going to be talking to Marc from the City of Crystal about emergency response and how to build the team's awareness and kind of be prepared for it instead of just reacting to these emergencies and the role you play with the different emergency responders.
Right. Yep. And then we're going to be talking to the Public Works Director from the City of Plymouth about how he came into an organization several years ago and kind of reorganized that Public Works Department and what process he went through to figure out where to move those pieces around and those positions and such. I think that's going to be a really interesting one.
Yeah, we do want to have a mix of topics of very technical things, like you can apply this thinking and this technology or this acute problem, but we also want to touch on some of the more management issues like, hey, how do we organize the Public Works Department? How do we communicate clearly? How do we set expectations? So that'll be a good podcast. We're also going to talk to at least one Public Works Director who's retiring and kind of talking about lessons learned and how things have evolved through their career and gets kind of those lessons learned. That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people that are in the industry that are thinking about the potential of becoming a city engineer or a public works director, I think that'll be really helpful for them just to kind of hear that journey, that public works director's journey, and their hits and misses through their career.
And we don't have a person lined up for this yet, but if you know of someone or if you are this type of person, I think it'd be great to talk to someone going from that assistant public works or from that city engineering position to the public works position, kind of almost do a little series of checking in once a month of how's it going and what are all the things you're learning you had no idea were coming, and maybe we can share some of our experiences to help along. So I feel like there's many different levels we're going to be doing this podcast at.
Yeah. And I just wanted to touch on one other topic, and that was we are going to have the director of the St. Paul Regional Water Service, which is a huge regional water provider here in the Twin Cities area in Minnesota. Going to talk to him about a massive rehabilitation and expansion of that water treatment facility, which is really impressive especially considering the age. It was originally constructed in the early 1900s, and now 130 years later, they're going through a massive updating the technology and everything within it. So that'll be exciting. And then we just want to throw this out there. And like Mike said already about asking for somebody who's in a certain role, moving up the ladder in a public works industry. We are going to be focused certainly on our friends and family right now in our early stages of this podcast, because that's who
work
we know.
on our nerves and build our skills. Yeah,
that's who we know. But we would love if you have something that a topic you're really passionate about, and you would like to maybe get interviewed on our podcast or be a guest on our podcast. Reach out, let us know.
Yeah, go to thepublicworksnerds.com and we have the kind of landing page website built there, and you can put in a comment and reach out to us, and we'll get that email. That will be our home base. We'll be building out a lot of the infrastructure. But, yeah, we'd love to hear from you, and we're looking for ideas and guests. And first and foremost, we want to be kind of that entertaining place to go find useful information with a side bonus of we're all licensed engineers, so the licensed engineers out there can claim the PDH CEUs.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say something about how we have to put a caveat on the entertaining side. We're engineers, so entertainment is a subjective thing, right?
It is.
But yes. But hopefully, as an engineer, you can use this for some professional development hours as well. That is our goal
Yes.
for these topics as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're doing the pre-planning, so it should meet all the requirements for your local licensing board.
Yeah. And, looking forward as this really kicks off, Mike and I are going to be at conferences. We'll definitely be at APWA in San Diego this year. We're recording. If you're listening to this in 2026 and you're listening to our intro episode, 3 years later, we'll be at that Public Works Expo as well. But we'll be at the Public Works PWX in San Diego at the end of August here, early September, and we'll have to get some swag. We'll have to get some Public Works nerds swag, and we'll be walking around. And if you see us, say hi.
Yes.
But that is the other thing is we're going to go. I personally, and I know Mike will too. We'll be going to conferences and such, and we'll be looking for those topics that are really good. We find an engaging speaker with a really good topic, and then we'll reach out to that person and try to get them on the podcast as well.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And the last request is hopefully dig into a couple of episodes, and kind of our gentleman's agreement is we're gonna make it worth your while. That this is going to be entertaining to listen to, but it's going to be a very educational podcast. You can get the PDHs. It's free. We intend it to always be free, but kind of the gentleman's agreement here is hopefully you enjoy it and you'll tell your colleagues about what we have going on. So that as we build up the podcast, that'll allow us to get even not better, but even more guests and more engagement. We feel we have a good lineup of guests right now,
Yep.
but we want to keep feeding the pipeline so we can release about one a week, 4 or 5 a month here.
All right. Well, hey, I'm really looking forward to this, Mike.
Yes.
This is going to be fun.
This will be fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marc.
Thank you.
Yep.